Elijah Brooks' world was one of silence, the kind of silence that soothes the ears after the clamor of battlefields. But this morning, in this small town in the remote corners of Virginia, the silence was different. It was the silence born of hate-filled eyes. "Shadow, come here," Elijah murmured, keeping his voice low. The black and grey German shepherd came immediately to his side. They both knew. They weren't wanted here. 47-year-old Elijah pulled up the collar of his leather jacket and stepped into the town square. In the 3 years since returning from the war, he had traveled across much of the United States, but he couldn't stay anywhere for long, because everywhere he went he encountered the same looks. He noticed Shadow's ears pricked up. The dog always sensed danger before he did. "Look at us, Shadow," he sighed. "We fought for our country, but we're still strangers in our own home." The town was called Millfield. Population 2,847. Elijah knew this number from the sign at the entrance, but there was something the sign didn't say. Only 7 black families lived in this town. As he walked down the main street, he felt the stares from the shop windows. Some were curious, some suspicious, but most were hostile. This was nothing new to him. Since returning from Afghanistan, he had experienced the same theatrical scene everywhere he went. A hero when you go to war, a problem when you come back, he thought with a bitter smile. As he walked toward the coffee shop, Shadow suddenly stopped. He lifted his nose in the air, then looked toward the narrow alley on the right. That alley led to the old part of town. "What did you smell, buddy?" Elijah asked. Shadow let out a low growl. It wasn't danger, but there was unease in his voice. As soon as he opened the door to the coffee house, all conversation stopped. A dozen people turned as one and stared at him. Elijah was used to this, but his heart still sank every time. "Good morning," he said in a polite voice. The silence was so thick you could hear Shadow breathing. The middle-aged woman behind the counter replied with difficulty, "What? What do you want?" "Can I have a coffee, please?" Elijah's voice was calm, but his eyes were tired. "Dogs aren't allowed in here," the woman said sternly. "Shadow is a service dog. I'm a war veteran. I have PTSD. I need my dog with me," Elijah explained in a calm tone. An old man in the coffee shop stood up. "We don't buy that kind of story here, son." "Who are you? Where are you from?" Elijah took a deep breath. "My name is Elijah Brooks. I served in the 10th Mountain Division. I completed 2 tours in Afghanistan. I have a Purple Heart. So what are you doing here?" asked another voice, "Just passing through." "I was going to stay a few days and then move on." The old man's eyes narrowed. "You won't find a place to stay in Millfield. This town likes to keep itself clean." The words hit Elijah like a slap in the face. The word clean was a very familiar sign to him. It was one of the code words racists like to use. "I understand," Elijah said calmly. "No problem." As he left the coffee shop, he could hear the whispers behind him. "They're always like that. They come in all polite. The dog's probably trained to attack. Someone should tell the sheriff." Elijah's hands clenched into fists, but the warmth of Shadow beside him calmed him. The dog could perfectly read his owner's emotional state. "Relax, buddy," Elijah said, petting his dog. "We have work to do here. We don't know what it is yet, but it's here." This strange intuition had saved him on the battlefield too. Some places held secrets waiting to be discovered. He turned off the main street and walked toward the outskirts of town. Here the houses looked smaller and older. He could see eyes watching him through some curtains that had been pulled back. Shadow suddenly stopped and sniffed at a trash can in front of a house. Elijah noticed. The trash can contained old newspapers, and they told a story. A piece of newspaper from 1963 caught his eye. "Peaceful protest in Millfield." "Interesting," he muttered. "I wonder what happened in this town in the 1960s. Shadow seemed bored with the newspaper. The dog had caught the scent of something more interesting. He started walking toward the woods at the end of the street. Elijah followed him. "What did you find, Shadow?" At the entrance to the woods was an old sign, "Private property, no trespassing." But the sign was so old that the writing was illegible. Shadow ignored the sign and plunged into the woods. "Shadow, wait!" Elijah called out, but the dog seemed locked onto a specific target. Elijah entered the forest too. It was very quiet here, an eerie silence. There weren't even any birds singing. Shadow kept moving forward. It was as if he had been here before. He knew the way very well. After walking for about 10 minutes, something glinted among the dense trees. A metal surface. "Shadow, stop!" Elijah called out. It took a few seconds to realize what he was looking at as he approached. On the ground, covered in leaves, was a metal lid. It looked like the entrance to an old shelter. Shadow sat down next to the hatch and looked at Elijah. It was as if he was saying, "This is it." Elijah carefully cleaned the hatch. There were faded letters on it. "Emergency shelter, 1955, 1955, Elijah repeated. "That's very old." "Cold War era?" He tried to open the hatch. It opened with some difficulty. He could see a dark staircase below. "Shadow, wait here," he said, but the dog was determined. He had already started down the stairs. Okay, let's go together," Elijah said with a laugh. He turned on his phone's flashlight and carefully descended. The shelter was quite spacious and dry. The walls were concrete, but they were still solid after all this time. The first thing he saw were the writings on the wall. "This place is safe. July 23rd, 1963. We hid here after the Washington movement." Another inscription. "Kids are okay. Mary is 15, James is 12. Sarah is 8. Uncle Wilson's house was burned down." Elijah's heart raced. This was a vivid testimony to the civil rights struggle of the 1960s. He went deeper. The walls were completely covered in writing. "The KKK is coming tonight. Everyone hide. The Johnson family was lynched. We are lucky he did this. White man. His name is Robert." Elijah shuddered when he read this last writing. At that time, white people who helped black people also took great risks. Shadow had found something in the far corner of the shelter. He kept sniffing it. Elijah approached. There was an old chest there. When he opened it, what came out shook him deeply. Photographs, dozens of photographs. Photographs of lynched people. Photographs of burned houses and a list. Titled "Millfield Lynching Victims, 1950-1965. There were 15 names on the list. 15 innocent people. As Elijah read the list, his hands began to shake. On Thomas Anderson, 23 years old, crime greeting a white woman. Mary Johnson, 34 years old, crime wanting to educate black children. 3 Michael Brooks, 28 years old, crime organizing a union for work. Brooks. His own surname. Elijah's world shook. Michael Brooks. Could it be? Shadow calmly came and sat next to him. It was as if he understood the significance of this discovery. There were other documents in the chest. A letter caught his attention. March 15th, 1965, dear family. If you are reading this letter, it means you have reached the secret shelter. This place is no longer safe. Sheriff Coleman is the leader of the KKK. The only white man you can trust in town is Robert Matthews, but even he has to be careful. What is happening in this town must be recorded. Future generations must know. Injustice must not remain hidden. There are more documents in the secret compartment of the shelter. Press the brick on the left wall. Grandfather Samuel Brooks. Elijah's heart stopped. Samuel Brooks. His grandfather's name. Shadow, he whispered. I think we've found my family's history. He found the brick on the left wall and pressed it. Sure enough, a secret compartment opened. What came out was even more shocking. Files, photographs, and most importantly, a diary. He opened the diary. June 10th, 1965, Michael came to town today. He's back from the army. I'm so proud of my son for the war. But the town has changed. The hatred has grown. Sheriff Coleman openly threatened, if the blacks keep fighting for their rights, they'll suffer the consequences. Robert Matthews warned us. They're going to attack tonight. Michael doesn't want to run. I faced death in the war, Dad. Why can't I face it here? He says, but I know. There is no justice here. There is only hatred. Next page, June 12th, 1965, we lost Michael. They burned him. God, they burned my son. Robert brought me here at the last minute. Samuel, he said, you must survive. Someone has to tell this story, but how can I tell it? Who will believe it? Who will care? I prepared this shelter for them, for those who will come in the future. If one day injustice ends, people will know. They will know what happened here. Elijah could no longer stand. He collapsed to the ground and tears began to flow. Michael Brooks. His grandfather, lynched, and Samuel Brooks, his great-grandfather. He built this shelter. Shadow came to his master's side and rested his head on his knee. The dog knew Elijah needed support right now. My grandfather, Elijah whispered. My grandfather was killed here and I never knew. This explained why his family had moved so often. It explained why they had no roots. The trauma had been passed down from generation to generation. There were more documents that needed to stay in the safe, but for now this was enough. He had taken in too much information. As he closed the box, he looked again at the top sheet of paper. There was a map there, a map of Millfield Town. Marked. Locations: X. Michael Brooks lynched. X. Johnson house burned. X. KKK meeting place, and where he was now. Safe shelter. Elijah realized this wasn't just his family's story. It was the story of all black families living during that time. "Shadow," he said as he stood up, "we have work to do here. These stories need to see the light of day." The dog barked as if in agreement. As they walked toward the shelter's exit, a plan formed in Elijah's mind. This town had to face its history, but first he needed to learn more about his own family. When they stepped outside, the sun was setting. Shadow sniffed the shelter's entrance again, then looked at Elijah. "Yes, my friend," said Elijah. "We'll be back here, but now we must return to town." When they turned onto the main street, the town still had the same cold atmosphere. But now, Elijah felt different. He was no longer just a passing stranger. This town was where he needed to put down roots. He stopped in front of the small motel, the Millfield Inn. The sign read vacancy. When he entered, an elderly woman at the front desk looked at him suspiciously. "I want a room," Elijah said. "How long will you be staying?" the woman asked reluctantly. "Maybe a week, maybe longer." The woman's face fell. "We don't have long-term stays here, only temporary stays." "No problem. I'll pay nightly." The woman grumbled but handed him the key. "Room 10. Extra charge for the dog." "Okay." As he went up to his room, his grandfather's words echoed in Elijah's mind. "Future generations must know, injustice must not be hidden." That night, sitting in his hotel room, Elijah began searching the internet. The results that came up when he typed Millfield lynching shocked him. Nothing came up. Historical records made it seem as if no racist attacks had ever occurred in Millfield. "Destroyed," he muttered. All the records had been destroyed, but he knew the documents in the shelter were real, and maybe there was more evidence. Early the next day, he set out to explore the town with Shadow. This time he had a different purpose. He found the town library. The elderly librarian looked uncomfortable when he saw Elijah. "Do you have local newspaper archives from the 1960s? Elijah asked. "What are you looking for?" "I'm researching my family history. My grandfather lived here." The librarian hesitated. "Our records from that period are incomplete." "Incomplete?" "There was a fire in 1970. Most of the documents were destroyed." Elijah could tell this was a lie. "No records left at all?" "Maybe. Maybe old Mrs. Henderson has something. She was the newspaper's former editor, but she doesn't talk anymore." "Where does she live?" The librarian reluctantly gave him the address. Elijah went to Mrs. Henderson's house with Shadow. It was a small white house with a well-kept garden. When he knocked on the door, an elderly woman in her 80s opened it. Her face changed when she saw Elijah. "I don't want to see anyone," she said, trying to close the door. "Mrs. Henderson, please, I just want to ask a few questions about my family history." The woman paused. "Your family? What's your last name?" "Brooks. I'm Michael Brooks's grandson." Mrs. Henderson's face turned ashen. She left the door open. "Come in," she said in a trembling voice, "but leave your dog outside. Shadow is my service dog. He needs to be with me." The woman thought for a moment, then nodded. Inside, while Mrs. Henderson made coffee, Elijah watched her. Her hands were shaking. "Are you really Michael's grandson?" she asked when they sat down. "Yes, just now in the woods outside town. I found a shelter." Mrs. Henderson's cup fell from her hand and shattered. "My God," she whispered, "after all these years." "You found it?" "Yes, I found my grandfather's diary. I learned that Michael Brooks was lynched." The old woman began to cry. I saw everything. I was a reporter, but no one would let me write about it." "What happened? Will you tell me the truth?" "Mrs." Henderson wiped her dried tears and began to speak. "It was 1965. The civil rights movement was at its peak. After the March on Washington, everything was chaotic in the South." "What happened to Michael?" He had returned from the war. From Vietnam. He was proud. He had fought for his country. But here he was still being treated like a nig. Elijah flinched when he heard this, but he kept listening. One day, Michael gave a speech in the middle of town, advocating for black people's right to vote. Sheriff Coleman warned him, "If you have nothing to say here, go say it somewhere else." But Michael didn't leave. "No," he said, "I fought for this country, and I'll fight for my rights here too." Mrs. Henderson paused, took a breath. That night they came. The KKK, but not just the KKK. Half the townspeople were there too. What happened? They took Michael from his house. Samuel and his wife Rosa hid. But Michael surrendered. "If you want me, I'm here," he said. Then they brought him to the center of town, to the square. And there they burned him. Elijah felt sick. Alive? Yes, and the whole town watched. Even the children were there. It was like a festival. What about you? What did you do? I took pictures from a distance. But my newspaper wouldn't publish them. It would damage the town's reputation, they said. What happened to the photos? Mrs. Henderson stood up and took a box out of the closet. I kept them for 50 years, because I knew one day someone would need to see them. When she opened the box, Elijah was horrified. The photos showed the lynching in great detail. Is this Michael?" he asked in a trembling voice. "Yes, your grandfather." In the photos, there was a crowd gathered in the square. Men, women, even children. They were all smiling, and in the middle, Michael Brooks tied to a tree. Even as he took his last breath, his head was held high. "He didn't seem afraid at all," said Mrs. Henderson. His last words were, "May God forgive you all." Elijah could no longer stand. Shadow came immediately to his side and supported him. "These people, are they still alive?" "Some died. But Sheriff Coleman's son Billy is the new sheriff now, and most of the participants' children are still here. Weren't they ever held accountable?" "No, even the FBI came back then. But they said insufficient evidence was found." The case was closed. Elijah had only one thought in his mind. This town had to face the truth. "Mrs. Henderson, can I take these photos?" The old woman hesitated. "It could be dangerous. This town hasn't changed. It's quietly racist. I'm not afraid. Maybe you aren't afraid, but they are powerful. They're still powerful." Elijah took the photos and put them in his pocket. "Thank you." "That was a very brave thing to do." Mrs. Henderson shook Elijah's hand. "Be careful, son. This town doesn't like its secrets." Elijah examined the photos one by one in his hotel room that night. Each frame turned his world upside down a little more. His grandfather Michael's final moments, the expressions of joy on the faces of the townspeople, even the children watching this savagery. Shadow lay quietly beside his owner, but he could sense Elijah's emotional state. The dog would occasionally lift its head and look at Elijah, then lie back down. "Shadow," Elijah whispered, "tomorrow we start settling the score with this town." He got up early the next morning. His plan was clear. First, he would examine the town's official records. Then he would confront those responsible for this murder. When he arrived at the town hall, a young secretary greeted him. The girl seemed slightly uncomfortable when she saw Elijah. "Can I help you?" she asked reluctantly. "I want to see the official records from the 1960s, Elijah said. "What kind of records?" "Death records, police reports, newspaper archives." The girl's expression changed. "Those kinds of old records. They're in the closed archives. You need permission. Whose permission do I get?" "From Mayor Mr. Morrison." Morrison. That name triggered something in Elijah's mind. His grandfather's diaries had mentioned that surname. "At Mr. Morrison's office?" "Yes, but he doesn't have an appointment today." Elijah waited, testing his patience. Finally, Mr. Morrison's secretary gave him an appointment. When he entered Morrison's office, he was met by a man in his 60s, overweight. When the man saw Elijah, a familiar expression appeared on his face, a mixture of superiority and discomfort. "Mr. Brooks, isn't it?" said Morrison. "What are you looking for in our town?" "I'm researching my family history. I'm looking for information about Michael Brooks, who lived here in the 1960s. Morrison's face tightened. "Our records from that period are very incomplete. I don't think we can help you." "Incomplete? Or deliberately hidden?" "What are you implying?" Elijah took one of the photographs from his pocket and placed it on the desk. Morrison's face turned ashen. This? Where did you find this? That's not important. What's important is this. This photo shows the lynching that took place in your town in 1965, and I believe there was injustice in that matter. Morrison stood up. That's slander. Nothing like that ever happened in this town. Then what is this photo? Is it fake? I don't know, but I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. Elijah could see the fear in Morrison's eyes. Mr. Morrison, was your father living here at that time? Why are you asking that? Because the name Morrison appears in my grandfather's diaries. The man began to sweat. My father, he died. He died a long time ago, but he was there that night, wasn't he? Morrison's silence was like an answer. Mr. Brooks, Morrison finally said, I have some advice for you. Don't mess with these old stories. Stirring up old wounds does no one any good. Justice benefits everyone. Justice, Morrison laughed bitterly. What justice are you talking about 50 years later? Everyone is dead. It's all over. Not everyone is dead. You are here. Sheriff Coleman's son Billy is here, and many others. Morrison's face changed completely. Now there was not just discomfort, but an open threat. Mr. Brooks, I'm telling you this one last time. If you don't plan on staying in this town for long, you'd be wise to leave. Elijah stood up. Is that a threat? It's advice. Thanks for the advice. But I'm staying here until I see my grandfather's killers brought to justice. As Elijah left Morrison's office, one thought occupied his mind. There was still an organized system in this town. And that system feared the truth coming out. At noon, he went to the small restaurant in the center of town. When he entered with Shadow, all conversation stopped again. No dogs allowed, the waiter said sternly. Service dog, Elijah repeated. I don't care. Outside. Elijah took a deep breath. Okay, but first let me say this. I'm Elijah Brooks. I'm Michael Brooks's grandson. And I'm investigating the truth about what happened in this town in 1965. Everyone in the restaurant froze. An old man stood up. You're Michael's grandson. Yes, the man's face showed mixed emotions. I'm Jim Henderson. I was Sue Henderson's husband. Elijah recognized the name. He was Mrs. Henderson's husband. I spoke with your wife yesterday. I know. She was very upset last night. She told you things she hasn't told anyone in 50 years. Were you there too? That night? Jim Henderson's eyes filled with tears. Yes, I was there, but I couldn't do anything. Why? Because I was scared. God, I was so scared. There were so many of them, and they were so angry. I just watched. Everyone in the restaurant heard this confession. Some looked shocked. Do you remember Michael's last words? Elijah asked. May God forgive you all, Jim Henderson said, crying. He felt sorry for us. He felt sorry for those who killed him. Elijah's eyes filled with tears, too. His grandfather hadn't chosen hatred, even in his final moments. So what happened next? Wasn't anyone held responsible? Another customer spoke up. The FBI came, but they found nothing, or didn't want to find anything. Sheriff Coleman. He was the one who orchestrated everything, but no one testified against him. So now, he's dead, but his son Billy is sheriff. Does that change anything? Jim Henderson shook his head. Billy's worse than his father. He's smarter, more dangerous. Elijah realized that the only thing that had changed in this town was that racism had become more sophisticated. As he left the restaurant, he turned to the waiter. This story won't end here. I'll make sure Michael Brooks gets justice. In the afternoon, he and Shadow walked through the old part of town. Here were the remains of houses where black families had lived in the 1960s. Shadow stopped at certain points and sniffed. It was as if he was following the traces of the past. An elderly black woman was sitting in front of one of the old houses. Elijah approached her. Hello, he said politely. The woman looked at Elijah. There was a look of recognition in her eyes. Are you from the Brooks family? Yes, Elijah Brooks. Michael Brooks's grandson. The woman stood up and hugged Elijah. I'm Mary Johnson. I was Michael's friend. Really? Yes. He was a very good man. When he came back from Vietnam, he wanted to change this town. What happened that night? Where were you? Mary Johnson's face twisted in pain. I hid. Samuel warned us. He said, don't leave the house tonight. But Michael did. Yes, he wasn't afraid. He used to say, If we don't fight for justice, we'll never be free. Mary invited Elijah into her home. It was a small, modest house, but it was warm. What did you learn from Michael? Elijah asked. He taught me to read. I was only 16 at the time. Black children couldn't get a proper school education. Michael was a volunteer teacher. What else did he do? He was fighting for workers' rights. Black workers were paid very little. He was trying to start a union. Is that why he was targeted? Yes, but not only that. Michael wasn't afraid. He stood up to white people. That made them very angry. Mary took out an old photo album. Look, this is Michael. In the photo was Michael Brooks, young and proud. He was wearing a military uniform and smiling. This was the last photo before he went to Vietnam, said Mary. He was very different when he came back. How was he different? He was more determined. I fought for my country over there, he said. I'll fight for my rights here. Elijah looked at the photo. He could see the same determination in his grandfather's eyes. Mary, does injustice still exist in this town? Of course it does. It's more subtle now, but it's there. Black kids still face discrimination. It's very hard for them to find jobs. And if you speak up, what happens? You lose your job. You lose your home, sometimes worse. Elijah understood that systemic racism still existed. It had just become more hidden. Mary, will you stand with me against this injustice? The old woman hesitated. I'm too old now, and I'm afraid I understand. But maybe together we can be stronger, Mary thought for a long time. If you guarantee that Michael will find justice, I'll support you. I guarantee it. That evening, in his hotel room, Elijah deepened his research. He gathered information online about the civil rights struggle of the 1960s. He learned that during that period, the FBI had a program called COINTELPRO. This program was used to intimidate civil rights activists. I wonder, he thought, if there is a file on Michael. He requested the file from the FBI's website under the Freedom of Information Act. It could take a long time, but it was worth trying. The next morning he went back to the safe house with Shadow. This time he wanted to examine it more closely. In the safe house he found documents he hadn't seen before. They were letters written by Samuel. Letter to Robert, 1965. My dear friend Robert, we lost Michael. Thanks to you I survived, but I couldn't save my son. I know you took risks for us too, but we can't stay here anymore. Rosa and I are heading south to my brother's place. I'm leaving this shelter for the future. Maybe one day justice will be served. Maybe one day it will be understood that Michael's death was not in vain. I am grateful to you. You were the only decent white man in this town, Samuel. A thought occurred to Elijah. Who was Robert? And was he perhaps still alive? After more searching in the shelter, he found Robert's last name, Matthews. When he returned to town, he looked up Robert Matthews in the phone book. He was still alive and had an address. Robert Matthews' house was in the wealthy part of town, a large white house with a well-kept garden. When he knocked on the door, an elderly man in his 80s opened it. He was surprised to see Elijah. I'm Elijah Brooks, Michael Brooks's grandson. I found the letters Samuel Brooks wrote. Robert Matthews' eyes widened. My God. Are you really Michael's grandson? Yes, the old man invited Elijah inside. The house was filled with antique furniture. I've been waiting for this day for 50 years, Robert said as they sat down. Why? Because I knew. One day someone would come and ask the truth. Robert began to recount that night. I was a young lawyer back then. I supported civil rights, but secretly. I couldn't speak openly. Did you know Michael? Yes, he asked me for legal help. He wanted to file a lawsuit for the right of black workers to form a union. Did you help him? Yes, but that made me a target. The KKK threatened me too. What happened that night? Robert's eyes filled with tears. Sheriff Coleman called me. Robert, he said, nothing will happen tonight. Stay home. I understood he had plans. Did you warn Samuel? Yes, I ran straight to Samuel. Take Michael and get out of town, I said. But Michael was stubborn. What did he say? Robert, I didn't run in the war and I won't run here, he said. If standing up for justice is dangerous, then let it be dangerous. Elijah felt proud hearing his grandfather's courage. Then what happened? That night a crowd gathered. I was there too, because I thought maybe I could do something. Did you do anything? Robert shook his head. No, nothing. I was scared too. We were all scared. Did you see Michael's last moments? Yes, he He didn't seem afraid at all. In fact, at the very end, he looked at the crowd and smiled. He smiled. Yes, it was as if he pitied them, as if he was saying, "I'm better than you." Tears streamed from Elijah's eyes. His grandfather had shown greatness even in his final moments. "Robert, did you ever regret it? Not doing anything?" "Every day. For 50 years, every day. That's why I spent so much money. I donated to civil rights organizations. But it never felt like enough. What can we do now?" Robert turned to Elijah. "What do you want to do?" "I want justice. I want the truth to come out. That will be very dangerous. This town has changed, but racism still exists. I know. But I have to do it for my grandfather." Robert thought for a long time. "Okay, I'll help you. This time I'll do the right thing." The 3 hours Elijah spent at Robert Matthews' house changed his life. The old man not only shared his memories of that night, but also showed him the evidence he had collected over 50 years. "Follow me," said Robert, leading Elijah to the basement. The basement was like an archive. It was filled with files, photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. Dozens of documents about the civil rights movement of the 1960s hung on the walls. "Did you collect all of this?" Elijah asked in amazement. "Yes, for 50 years. Because I knew that one day someone would need it." Robert pulled out a special file. It said Michael Brooks' file on it. "What's in it?" "Everything I collected about Michael's murder. FBI reports, witness statements, photos, even audio recordings from that night." "Audio recordings?" Robert smiled proudly. "I kept up with new technology back then. I got a hidden recording device. That night I recorded everything." Elijah's heart raced. "Is it still playable?" "Of course. Come, let's listen." Robert pulled out an old cassette player and inserted the tape. The electronic sounds from the device filled the room. Then, voices from the past. "Take that, Nig. Hang him. Let it be a lesson to them all." And then, clearly and distinctly, Sheriff Coleman's voice. "Nothing happened here tonight. Nobody saw anything. Is that clear?" The crowd murmured in agreement. Then, from further away, Michael's voice. "May God forgive you all," and Elijah's hair stood on end. He was hearing his grandfather's last words 50 years later. This is unbelievable," he whispered. "But that's not the most important thing," said Robert. "Keep listening." The tape contained another speech by Sheriff Coleman. "If the FBI comes, no one will talk. Half the town is involved in this. If anyone talks, the same thing will happen to them." "That's an open threat," Elijah said. "Yes, and there's more on this tape. Names, plans, even future targets." The tape continued playing. "We need to take care of Samuel Brooks, too. Robert Matthews talks too much. We need to keep an eye on him, too. Blacks will know their place in this town." Elijah realized that Michael's murder was not just an isolated incident. It was part of a systematic campaign of terror. "Robert, you never showed these recordings to anyone before." "I did. I gave them to the FBI in 1966. "And what happened?" Robert laughed bitterly. "Nothing. They said, there's not enough evidence. They said the sound quality isn't clear. They said it wouldn't hold up in court. But this is clear evidence." "Yes, but many FBI agents were racist back then. They didn't want to see the truth." Elijah understood the depth of the systematic injustice. It had been covered up not just locally, but at the federal level too. "So what can we do now?" Robert pulled out another file. "This is important too. What happened in town after Michael's death." The file contained a list of black families who fled Millfield between 1965 and 1970. 47 families, said Robert. A total of 200 people. They all moved because they were afraid. Just because of Michael's death? No, that was just the beginning. After that, the systematic oppression started. People refusing to hire them, refusing to rent them houses, refusing to let their children go to school. Silent racism. As Elijah looked over the list, he saw familiar names. Johnson, Williams, Jackson. These names also appeared in his grandfather's diaries. Where are these families now? Most are in the South. Atlanta, Birmingham, Mobile. I'm in contact with them. Really? Yes, because I'm guilty too. I didn't do anything that night either. This is my attempt to atone for my sin. Elijah understood Robert's remorse, but he also appreciated the work he had done over the past 50 years. Robert, will you share these records and documents with the media? Of course. But you know the documents alone won't be enough, right? What do you mean? This town still has the same mindset. Sheriff Billy Coleman is smarter than his father, but just as racist. Mayor Morrison was a witness that night, and many others. So what can we do? Robert thought for a long time. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for this town to face its past. How? A public memorial service. On the anniversary of Michael's death. June 15th, Elijah calculated. 3 weeks left, won't that be too dangerous? Yes, but it's necessary. That night Elijah thought about his plan in his hotel room. Shadow lay at his feet, but he sensed Elijah's tension. Organizing a memorial service would stir up the town. But maybe it was necessary. He picked up his phone and called Mary Johnson. Mary, I have a suggestion. I'm thinking of organizing a memorial service on the anniversary of Michael's death. There was a long silence on the phone. Elijah, Mary finally said, this is very dangerous. I know. But justice cannot be served any other way. Who will attend? You, Robert Matthews, Mrs. Henderson, and hopefully more people. How will the town react? I don't know. But we can't back down out of fear. Mary thought for a long time. Okay, I'm in. For Michael. The next day, Elijah went to town hall to request permission for a memorial service. At the town hall, Morrison's secretary gave him a cold reception. Mr. Morrison doesn't want to talk to you, she said. Why? Because you're causing trouble. I just want justice. What you want isn't justice, it's chaos. Elijah understood that he wouldn't get permission through official channels. But that wouldn't stop him. He called Robert and explained the situation. No problem, said Robert. You don't need permission. The town square is a public space. It's our constitutional right. What about security? I'll take care of it. I have friends in the state police. Elijah realized that Robert's status as a respected lawyer had its advantages. The next few days were spent preparing for the memorial service. Robert contacted his old friends. Mary notified the black families in town. Mrs. Henderson gathered old photographs. Elijah, meanwhile, was walking around town with Shadow, observing people's reactions. Word spread quickly. The town was divided. One group supported the memorial service, while the other vehemently opposed it. One afternoon, Elijah was sitting in the coffee shop when 3 men approached him. Sheriff Billy Coleman, Mayor Morrison, and a third man he didn't recognize. Mr. Brooks, Sheriff Coleman said coldly, we want to see you. I'm here. This memorial idea is yours, isn't it? Yes, Morrison stepped forward. You're disrupting the peace in this town. You're turning people against each other. I'm just telling the truth, the third man spoke. I'm Deputy District Attorney Williams. Your event poses a risk of disturbing the public order. It's my constitutional right. Yes, but the town's safety is more important. Sheriff Coleman looked at Elijah sternly. Mr. Brooks, my advice to you is this. Drop this. For your own sake and for the town's. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Elijah looked at Shadow. The dog sensed the tension and stayed close to his owner. Thanks for the warning, Elijah said calmly. But I won't back down. After the 3 men left, the other customers in the cafe looked at Elijah. Some eyes showed support, others hostility. That evening he called Robert and explained the situation. I expected it, Robert said. They're afraid. Because if the truth comes out, it will affect a lot of people. What do you mean? Most of the people who participated in the 1965 lynching have children who are influential in the town now. Morrison's father was there. Sheriff Coleman, you already know. Many others. So this is a cover-up that has been going on for generations? Exactly. Elijah understood that he was fighting not only with the past, but also with the present. A week before the memorial service, there was an unexpected development. Elijah's request for his FBI file was granted. When he opened the thick envelope that arrived in the mail, the documents inside shocked him. Michael Brooks' FBI file was over 200 pages long, and the information it contained was incredible. Subject: Michael Brooks, potential security threat. Category: civil rights activist, under surveillance. Notes: Vietnam veteran. Influential in the black community. Organizing a union. Potential danger. The file contained reports documenting Michael's every move, who he spoke to, where he went, what he said. But the most shocking part was the reports after Michael's death. June 15, 1965. Subject eliminated. Note: coordination with local authorities. Secured. Status closed. Successful. The FBI had deemed Michael's death a success. Elijah's hands were shaking. This showed that Michael's death wasn't just the work of local racists. They had support at the federal level. There were other names in the file. Other civil rights activists killed during that period. All had been recorded as successful in the same way. He immediately called Robert and explained the situation. "My God," said Robert, "this is what I've suspected for 50 years. But there was no proof. Now there is. Yes. Will you announce these documents at the memorial service?" "Of course. People need to know the truth." 3 days before the memorial service, media interest began. Local television stations reported the news. The hashtag Tucker Justice for Michael trended on social media, but at the same time a counter-campaign began. Some residents of the town were organizing to stop the memorial service. When Elijah woke up one morning, he found a note on his motel room door. "This is your final warning. Leave this town or you'll end up like Michael." Shadow sniffed the note and growled. He sensed the danger too. Elijah called Robert. "I'm getting threats. Me too. But we won't back down, right?" "No, but we must take security measures." Robert arranged for a private security company. There would be protection during the memorial service. The day before the memorial service, Elijah went to the shelter one last time. He reread his grandfather's diaries. "Michael, you are a brave man. I hope that one day justice will be served for you. I hope your death was not in vain." "It wasn't in vain, Grandpa," Elijah whispered. "Tomorrow the whole town will know." On the morning of June 15th, people began to gather in the town square. 2 groups had formed. On one side were those who supported the memorial service. On the other were those who opposed it. Elijah, Robert, Mary, and Mrs. Henderson took the stage. There were about 200 people in the square. Elijah began speaking into the microphone. "For years ago today, a terrible injustice was committed in this town. My grandfather, Michael Brooks, was lynched simply for wanting equal rights." Mixed voices came from the crowd. Some agreed, some protested. But this wasn't just a single incident, Elijah continued. It was part of systemic racism. Then he pulled out the FBI documents. "These documents show that my grandfather's death was supported at the federal level. The FBI considered him a potential threat." The crowd was shocked. Learning that a federal crime had been committed affected everyone. Then Robert took the stage and played the 58-year-old audio recording. Those who heard Sheriff Coleman's voice froze. Because that voice was still recognized by many people alive today. "This recording shows," said Robert, "that an organized murder was committed that night. And then it was systematically covered up. Some in the crowd were crying, others were shouting angrily. Elijah took the microphone again. "I'm not seeking revenge. I'm seeking justice. This town must face its past. And it must work to ensure that such injustices are not repeated in the future." When he finished speaking, the crowd applauded. But there were also violent protests. Sheriff Billy Coleman tried to take the stage, but security stopped him. "This is slander," he shouted. "My father was a man of integrity." But the audio recordings exposed his lie. After the memorial service, the media showed great interest. National television stations reported the news. The FBI documents sparked a major controversy. That evening, while Elijah was sitting in his hotel room, the phone rang. The caller was an FBI agent. "Mr. Brooks, my name is Agent Sarah Wilson. We would like to speak with you." "About what?" "The Michael Brooks case." "It's being reopened." Elijah was surprised. "Really?" "Yes. In light of the evidence you uncovered, we are launching a formal investigation." This was more than Elijah had hoped for. Justice would be sought not only locally, but also at the federal level. In the days that followed, the town underwent a major transformation. The national media's interest changed everything. Sheriff Billy Coleman was removed from office. Mayor Morrison resigned. Many people were placed under investigation, but most importantly, the townspeople were forced to face the truth. A week later, Mary Johnson called Elijah. "Elijah, things are changing in town." The young people were shocked when they learned the truth. "They talk differently now." "That's good news, and there's more good news. The town council approved a memorial in Michael's honor." Elijah's eyes filled with tears. His grandfather's name was finally receiving the respect it deserved. People came from all over town for the memorial's dedication ceremony. The monument was simple but effective. A photo of Michael Brooks with the inscription below. "Michael Brooks, 1937-1965. Vietnam veteran, civil rights activist, died for justice, will not be forgotten." As Elijah stood before the monument, Shadow came and sat beside him. They both knew this was only the beginning. "Grandpa," Elijah whispered, "justice has been served. But you were right. The fight never ends." There was a different atmosphere in the town square now. People spoke to each other with more respect. The younger generation asked questions about the past. After the memorial ceremony, Elijah went to Robert's house. "This is just the beginning," said Robert. "Now the real work begins." "What do you mean?" "Systemic change. The education system, police training, social dialogue. Everything must change." Elijah understood that Robert was right. Erecting a monument wasn't enough. Real change had to be systemic. That evening, he walked with Shadow through the town's old black neighborhood. The looks were different now. Not fear, but respect. A group of young people approached him. "Mr. Brooks," said one of the young people, "our generation will be different. We learned that thanks to you." "What matters is living what you've learned," said Elijah. "We will." "We promise." Elijah's heart filled with hope. Perhaps the next generation would not repeat the mistakes of the past. When he returned to his hotel room that night, he read the last page of his grandfather's diary. "If one day injustice ends, Michael's spirit will find peace. He died for that." Elijah took the pen and added to the journal, "June 16th, 2023, justice has been served. Michael's spirit is at peace now." But the fight continues. For the next generation, Shadow was sleeping at his feet. Elijah stroked him. "What will we do tomorrow, my friend?" he asked. Shadow lifted his head as if he understood and looked at Elijah. His eyes said, "Wherever you go, I'll be there." Elijah realized his work in this town was done. But there were other injustices elsewhere. Together with Shadow, they would continue their journey, because justice was a journey that never ended. A month after the memorial service at Millfield, Elijah and Shadow hit the road. Their old pickup truck carried them south along Virginia's winding roads. Elijah had no plan, he was simply following his instincts. Shadow, as always, sat quietly beside his owner. After his grandfather found justice, a void had formed in Elijah's life. It was as if a heavy burden he had carried for so long had been lifted from his shoulders. Yet at the same time, a search for a new purpose had begun. "Shadow," he said as he pulled the car into a gas station, "where do you think we're going?" The dog lifted his nose into the air as if to show he understood and sniffed the distance. Then he turned to Elijah and barked softly. At the gas station, an old man approached them. He was black and limped slightly as he walked. "Good day," said the man. "Are you travelers too?" "Yes," replied Elijah. "I'm Elijah Brooks." "This is Shadow. I'm Henry Washington. Are you staying around here?" Elijah looked around. It was a small town, Chapman's Creek. Population maybe 2,500, I don't know. "We haven't decided where to go yet." A thoughtful expression crossed Henry's face. "If you're veterans, I wouldn't recommend staying in this town. Especially with Shadow. Why?" "Lately, strange things have been happening. Black veterans are being harassed. Their dogs are disappearing." Elijah's attention heightened. "What kind of harassment?" "Last week, my friend James, who's a veteran, had his dog disappear. It was a service dog, just like Shadow. The police did nothing. What else happened?" Henry looked around, then lowered his voice. 2 months ago, another black veteran, Marcus, was found dead in his home. The police said natural causes, but Marcus was only 35 and healthy. Elijah's combat training kicked in. This was too specific to be coincidence. "How's the police force here?" "There's Sheriff Bradley. White guy, very strict, doesn't like black people much." "What are you doing here, Henry?" "I'm retired. But I live carefully. I don't make noise, I don't bother anyone." Elijah could understand Henry's fear, but at the same time it bothered him. "Henry, if I stay here, is there a safe place?" "Why would you want to stay?" "Because if black veterans are being targeted, it needs to be stopped." Henry was surprised. You're involved in this kind of thing?" "Sometimes. Recently I encountered a similar situation in another town." Henry looked Elijah up and down. There was a confidence about the man's bearing that came from war. "Okay, the motel isn't very safe, but I have a friend, Dr. Williams. She can help you." Dr. Williams' clinic was in the town's black neighborhood. It was small and clean, and there were a few patients in the waiting room. Dr. Williams was a woman in her 50s with an intellectual appearance. She was surprised to see Elijah and Shadow. "Henry called me," she said. "Are you Mr. Brooks?" Yes, can what we discuss remain confidential? Of course. Doctor-patient confidentiality. Dr. Williams took them into her private office. Shadow sniffed around the room before sitting down next to Elijah. Henry mentioned problems with black veterans, said Dr. Williams. What do you want to know about this? Everything. Start from the beginning. Dr. Williams took a deep breath. I started noticing it 3 months ago. Black veterans were having problems with the police. It started small, traffic tickets, ID checks. Then it escalated. How? Remember Marcus Johnson? He was a veteran, had PTSD and a service dog. One night he was found dead in his home. How did he die? The official report says heart attack, but I performed the autopsy. There were suspicious marks on Marcus. What kind of marks? A small needle mark on his neck. And in the blood test, an abnormal chemical substance. Elijah's skin prickled. That points to murder. Yes, but when I told the police, they said Marcus was using drugs. That was a lie. Marcus was clean. Any other cases? James Peterson. His dog Rex went missing. While James was searching for him, he was accidentally beaten up. He's in the hospital now. Who beat him up? The police said unknown assailants. But James says he recognized the police officers' voices. Elijah recognized this pattern. Systematic targeting. Black veterans were being specifically targeted. Dr. Williams, have you filed any official complaints about these cases? Yes, I wrote to the Federal Bureau, the state police, even the FBI. I never got a response from any of them. What about the local media? There's only one newspaper, the Chapman Creek Herald. The owner is white and supports the police. Elijah realized this town was also under systematic cover-up. Dr. Williams, what do these veterans have in common? They're all black, they all suffer from PTSD, and they all have service dogs. Are the service dogs an important detail? Yes, because these dogs protect their owners. And they're expensive. They could be targets for theft. Elijah looked at Shadow. The dog rested its head on Elijah's knee, as if it understood what was being said. Dr. Williams, can I visit James Peterson? Of course. But be careful. There are security cameras in the hospital. On the way to the hospital, Elijah noticed something. As they drove through the city, the same police car was following them. Shadow sensed it too. He walked tensely and cautiously. Chapman Creek Hospital was small but clean. James Peterson was in a single room on the 3rd floor. The sight that greeted Elijah when he entered the room shook him. James was a black man in his 30s, but his face was almost unrecognizable. It was covered in bruises, stitches, and bandages. James? Elijah called softly. The man opened his eyes. Speaking was difficult because his jaw was broken. Who are you? I'm Elijah Brooks, veteran. Dr. Williams sent me. A look of recognition flashed in James's eyes. You could be a target too. Why? Because they're operating systematically. Who are they? James looked around, then whispered, Not the police. A special group. But they work with the police. What kind of special group? I don't know. But when they took Rex, there were men in civilian clothes among them. They looked like they had military training. Alarm bells rang in Elijah's head. Civilians with military training, service dog theft, targeting black veterans. James, what exactly happened the night of the attack? I went out looking for Rex. I heard him in the woods in a lot of pain. I ran towards him. But when I got there, there were 4 men. They had Rex locked in a cage. What did you do? Let my dog go, I said. They laughed. One said, he's not your dog anymore. Then they started attacking, but the way they attacked, it was professional. They knew where to hit and where not to hit. This detail alarmed Elijah. Not amateur violence, but trained violence. What happened to Rex? I don't know. I haven't heard anything since I was taken to the hospital. Elijah squeezed James's hand. Don't worry. I'll find him. Leaving the hospital, Elijah made his plan. This time he wouldn't just observe. He would actively investigate. That night he began exploring the area around the town. Together with Shadow, he roamed the wooded areas. Thanks to his special training, the dog could track scents. About 2 hours later, Shadow noticed something. He lifted his nose, sniffed, and began walking quickly in a specific direction. Elijah followed him. They passed through dense trees and climbed a small hill. On the other side of the hill, Elijah couldn't believe what he saw, a burned-out police car. The vehicle was completely blackened, but the characteristic shape of a police car was clear. The windows were broken, the doors were open, and the interior was completely burned out. Shadow approached the car and sniffed it. Then he turned to Elijah and barked, "What did you find, buddy?" Elijah examined the car closely. The metal box in the back seat had survived the fire. When he opened it, he found water-damaged files inside. When he opened the first file, his heart stopped. Chapman Creek Police, Special Operations, Target List, Black Veterans. There were 15 names on the list. Marcus Johnson's name was crossed out in red pen. James Peterson's name was marked in yellow pen. At the top, in capital letters, Operation Cleanup. Elijah continued reading the file. Objective: neutralization of problematic black veterans in the area. Method: systematic harassment. Seizure of service dogs, physical intervention if necessary. Coordinator: Sheriff Bradley plus Special Team, Blackwater subsidiary. Blackwater. Elijah recognized the name. The private military company. Other files contained more detailed information. Why veterans are targeted. Black veterans with PTSD have the potential to organize the community. Service dogs empower them. This poses a threat to regional stability. Dog program. Stolen service dogs will be retrained and sold to private security companies. $50,000 per dog. This wasn't just racism. This was organized crime. The bottom file contained even more shocking information. Federal support. Coordinated operation with ATF and DEA. Veterans will be registered as drug dealers. Elijah could now see the whole picture. The local police, private military company, and federal agents were working together. The last file contained a map. The safe houses around the town were marked on it, probably where the stolen dogs were being held. Sensing Elijah's tension, Shadow came over and rested his head on Elijah's leg in a soothing manner. "Shadow," Elijah whispered, "we've stumbled into a very big conspiracy." But at the same time, he wondered why this evidence had been left in a burned-out vehicle. Was it a trap? As he examined one of the maps, one name caught his attention. Agent Miller, ATF liaison officer. The name sounded familiar. There was an Agent Miller in the FBI investigation at Millfield, too. He pulled out his phone and did a quick search. Jack Miller, ATF agent, had been mentioned in various civil rights cases, and in all of them, the evidence had disappeared or been tampered with. This guy, Elijah thought, is sabotaging operations at the federal level. He put the files in his bag and returned to the car with Shadow. But as they left, he heard other sounds in the forest, engines, and they were getting closer. "Shadow, hurry." They both ran to the car. Elijah started the engine and sped away. Looking in the rearview mirror, he saw 3 SUVs following them. "Where should we go, Shadow?" The dog turned his head in a certain direction, as if he knew the way. Elijah trusted Shadow's instinct and went that way. They passed through narrow forest roads and came out onto the main road. The cars behind them were still there. Elijah sped up. The old pickup wasn't powerful, but it was light and maneuverable on narrow roads. Half an hour later, they lost the pursuing vehicles. But Elijah knew they were now clearly targets. He went to Dr. Williams' clinic. It was evening and the clinic was closed, but he entered through the back door. "Dr. Williams," he called out. The woman came out of her office. She was surprised to see Elijah's face. "What happened? You look terrible." Elijah placed the files on the desk. "I found these. There's a systematic operation." Dr. Williams examined the files. She was shocked by what she read. "My God. Is this real?" Yes, and now I'm being targeted. What are we going to do?" "We need to get these files to the media and federal authorities." "But to the right people," Dr. Williams thought. "I know a reporter. She works for the Washington Post. She's reliable. Call her." Journalist Sandra Martinez arrived at Chapman Creek the next morning. She was in her 40s, an experienced investigative reporter. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "if these files are real, this is a huge scandal. How can you verify it?" "I'll check federal records. I'll look into Blackwater's contracts. And I'll talk to different people at the FBI." Elijah gave her the photocopies. "I'll keep the originals. For security." That evening, sitting in his motel room, Elijah got a call. "Mr. Brooks, this is Agent Sarah Wilson, FBI. We spoke." "Yes, I remember. I've learned you're in Chapman Creek. It's very dangerous. I advise you to leave immediately." "Why?" Because what's happening there is under federal investigation. If you interfere, everything could get complicated." Elijah was suspicious. This seemed too easy. What federal investigation? There was a long silence on the phone. This is classified information. Agent Wilson, I didn't tell you I was in Chapman Creek. How do you know? We're monitoring you. For your safety. Elijah hung up. This was a fake call. Or there were problems within the FBI, too. Shadow sensed his owner's tension and sat down at his feet. Shadow. I guess we can't trust anyone. The next morning, he called Dr. Williams. The doctor was very worried. Elijah, bad news. James Peterson is missing. What do you mean, missing? He was taken from the hospital last night. No one knows by whom. This was a terrible sign. James was the only witness. Dr. Williams, are you safe? I don't know, but I'm not afraid. It might be wise to be afraid. Consider leaving town for a while. That afternoon, Elijah heard from reporter Sandra Martinez. Elijah, I verified the files. Everything is real. Blackwater has a secret contract with the ATF. Great, when will you publish? Tomorrow. But I'm worried about you. When this article comes out, you'll be the main target. I understand. You need to go somewhere safe. Elijah thought about it. He could return to Millfield. Robert Matthews would protect him. But first he had to rescue the stolen dogs at Chapman Creek. That night, he went out to check the safe house addresses on the map. The first address was a farm outside town. With Shadow, they approached the farm. In the darkness of night, the farm seemed quiet. But Shadow sensed something. His ears perked up and he let out a low growl. Elijah circled the farm. At the back, there was a large warehouse. Dog sounds were coming from inside. He managed to open the warehouse. The scene he saw inside shook him. There were 12 dogs. They were all in cages, and they were all wearing vests that showed they were service dogs. Some were injured, some were very thin. In one of the cages was a large golden retriever. The dog's vest read Rex, Rex, Elijah whispered. James's dog. Rex, seeing Elijah, and though he didn't recognize him, understood that he had come to rescue him. He wagged his tail. Elijah began opening the cages. But just then he heard noises at the warehouse door. Anyone there? 2 men entered. They were armed. Freeze! One shouted, but Shadow was ready. His combat dog training kicked in. He attacked swiftly, catching both men off guard. During the fight, Elijah managed to open all the cages. 12 dogs were free. Everyone run, he yelled. The dogs ran into the forest, following their natural instincts. Rex turned to Elijah one last time, as if to thank him, then ran away too. Elijah and Shadow ran to the pickup truck and sped away. The next morning, Sandra Martinez's article was published. The headline read, Federal Agents Targeting Black Veterans, Covert Operation Exposed. The article had a major impact nationwide. Chapman Creek was immediately placed under federal investigation. Sheriff Bradley was arrested, but Elijah knew this was only the beginning. Because Agent Miller was still at large, that afternoon he received an unexpected call. Mr. Brooks, this is Agent Miller, ATF. Elijah struggled to control his anger. What do you want? I want to talk. Face to face. Why should I talk to you? Because you don't see the bigger picture. What bigger picture? These veterans aren't innocent, Mr. Brooks. They are genuinely dangerous. How are they dangerous? They're radicalizing. They're organizing against the system. They pose a potential terrorist threat. Elijah found this ridiculous. They're just fighting for their rights. Not their rights, Mr. Brooks. They're looking for rebellion. Do you have proof? Of course I do. But to show you, you'll have to come with me. Elijah knew it was a trap. But at the same time, he could gather information about Miller's real agenda. Where will we meet? Chapman Creek Park at 3 o'clock. The park was in the center of town. In daylight, it was a crowded place. Elijah took a gun with him and went with Shadow. Miller was waiting alone in the park. He was a man in his 50s with a formal appearance. Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming. Talk, Miller pulled out a file. These are the actual intelligence reports on the black veterans. Elijah looked at the file. Inside were various veterans' social media posts, phone conversations, and meeting transcripts. This is illegal surveillance. No, this is national security. How is this national security? These are innocent people. Miller laughed. Innocent? Marcus Johnson told those around him that we need to fight the white system. That's freedom of speech. No, that's incitement to rebellion. Elijah realized Miller was truly paranoid. The man perceived normal conversations as threats. Miller, you're a sick man. I'm not sick, Mr. Brooks. I'm a patriot. And I'm going to stop people like you, and you can't stop me. Really? Miller smiled. We know what you did at Chapman Creek. You stole the dogs. That's a federal crime. Those dogs were stolen. No, those dogs were legally seized, on the grounds that their owners were drug dealers. Lies. Can you prove it? Elijah realized Miller's system was flawless. They had legalized everything. Miller, I'm going to stop you. How? The media isn't on your side anymore, because soon files about you will be released too. What files? Elijah Brooks, former military personnel, risk of radicalization, posing a threat with a service dog. This is complete nonsense, but the public will believe it. Because you're already in the problematic veterans category. Elijah stood up angrily. Shadow went on alert. This isn't over, Miller. Oh, yes, it is, because tomorrow an arrest warrant will be issued for you. Elijah left the park, but his mind was racing. Miller's system was very powerful. That evening, he called Dr. Williams and explained the situation. Elijah, you must leave town immediately, but if I run, they win. If you die, they win. Elijah knew he was right. But at the same time, he didn't want to give up this fight. Late that night, sitting in his hotel room, an idea came to him. The files Miller had shown him were evidence of illegal surveillance. If he could get them to the right people, he took out his phone and called Sandra Martinez. Sandra, do you know any civil rights lawyers? Yes, why? Because federal agents are conducting illegal surveillance. And I have proof. Are you serious? Yes, but we need to hurry. The next morning, ACLU lawyer Jennifer Wong Chapman arrived at Creek. Elijah showed her what Miller had shown him. Attorney Jennifer Wong listened carefully to Elijah's account and examined the files retrieved from the burned police car. These files are critical, said Jennifer. But first we need to verify their authenticity. How will you verify them? Handwriting analysis, paper analysis, and cross-reference checks. If they're real, this will be a national scandal. 3 days later, Jennifer returned. She had a serious look on her face. Elijah, the files are real. And your case is going to federal court. What does that mean? A federal investigation is being launched into Miller and his team. Illegal surveillance, civil rights violations, forming a criminal conspiracy. Within a week, the story broke. Miller was arrested, Sheriff Bradley was removed from office, and the secret contract between Blackwater and the ATF was cancelled. A major cleanup began in Chapman Creek. A new sheriff was appointed, and the police force was reorganized. Most importantly, the stolen dogs were reunited with their owners. James Peterson was released from the hospital and reunited with Rex. How was this possible? James asked Elijah. Thanks to Shadow, Elijah said, petting his dog. He found that burned-out car. It's like he knew, James said in amazement. He knew. Dogs sense injustice better than we do. 3 months later, Elijah and Shadow hit the road again. But this time they had something else with them. Hope. Dr. Williams had said goodbye to him with these words. Elijah, you changed not just this town, but the system. Now at the federal level, operations targeting veterans will be much harder. Elijah sat behind the wheel of the pickup and looked at Shadow. Where to now, buddy? Shadow, as always, looked into the distance. It was as if he was trying to sense the next injustice. Elijah started the engine. The road was long, but he was no longer alone. Shadow was by his side, and both knew the fight for justice never ends. But every victory won made the next one easier. His grandfather's spirit was at peace. The fight against systemic racism continued, and Elijah Brooks and Shadow were on the front lines of that fight.